This is Alamo Anthem, where we, the overtaxed, remember our liberty. Direct from the forgotten countryside outside of Alamo City, San Antonio.
So I'm reading here in the Devine News, Natalia ISD okays contract with education consulting company. What does that mean? Well, so apparently the Natalia ISD has hired a consulting company called Moke Casey to basically do what the board's supposed to do, is what I got out of this article. It says here, the company's services include academics, assessments, accountability, school finance, economic development, legislative and strategic thought, design and continuous improvement services. And yeah, so they are trying to get Natalia to pass those bonds, and because that's how they're going to get paid.
Why is it hard for the Natalia school board or school district to pass the bond in the first place?
70% of their population is without school-age children.
So they don't want it.
Right. They don't want. They won't want property taxes increased.
Okay, so they've hired some other group from somewhere else.
It's called
to come in and talk these people into it somehow. Is that right?
I guess it's basically a consulting firm. I think what they do, it's called Moke Casing, according to this article.
How do you spell that?
MOAK. And then Casey, CASEY, consulting. So they contract with different school districts across the state. I don't know why. Probably to get them to help them pass bonds. That's what I think.
Here, when you just Google it and they come up on the top link, it says specializing in high quality research and planning services for those concerned with the financial operation and management of public schools.
So it sounds like a marketing type thing, so they can get more people to vote for bonds.
Right.
I'm sure if you Google on there, the school bond of Natalia, I think they've been having a hard time passing the school bond. It's a really small school district. There's only 1,273 students, and 120 are transfers. And I'm like, from where? Where are they transferring? I live in Devine. I don't think
There's
I would
other
transfer.
little towns that are even smaller.
Maybe. It's just so small.
I'm not against, like, school boards or cities or city councils or anything like that seeking information from, like, other sources to kind of, like improve their cities or whatnot. I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense. But, like we were talking about with Connor Boyack, right? So he runs a political advocacy institute, right? And so they'll have like, oh, these are the different legislative bills that we, like to get passed or whatever. It sounds like this is kind of similar, except the difference is that it's like these are people that you hire to get certain stuff done. But it looks like, you could potentially say, hey, we are not spending money efficiently. Like, what can you do to help us, like, with our budget? And then they can go through and, like, well, this is the way that it's the most efficient. So, in principle, it's not necessarily, a bad thing but to me, what seems kind of nefarious about this situation is it's saying, we're going to take taxpayers' money and we're going to hire a consulting firm to then convince those taxpayers that they should pass higher taxes so that we can do the things that we want to do in our district.
Well, I know Natalia ISD has been struggling financially for some time because I know they're down to 4-day school week.
Which, in my opinion, is awesome.
Same.
Even though I'm sure that there's parents who would prefer it not be that way. But
yeah.
It's still, I think, far and away better for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were just talking a few minutes ago, and you were reading part of it about what they are...
the buses?
Yeah, the buses, what they plan to do, and then why they're... how they put what it is that they're trying to do with the... they said they need to pull in the 70% or something like that. How'd they word that?
They said 70% of the population... This is a quote. Quote, 70% of the population do not have school-age children, he said. You have to find a way to pull them in, unquote.
Because Natalia is, I mean, there's just so many people who live on land. They're farmers or they're older and retired. I mean, these aren't like, this isn't a really wealthy area.
No.
And so the idea that they're trying to, they're spending the money that they're already taking from people to find ways to convince them to give them more money when they're poor, especially, seems, I don't know. I just hate it.
Or even just that they've done what they can to become self-sufficient, right? I mean, you drive through there's the rural part of it, and it's like, farm after farm. You don't know what's going on with those people, but they're just kind of, they might be doing all right. They might be running a little successful farm. They might be having like a welding business or whatever.
Yeah.
But, it's this idea of coming in and being like, hey, we need some of your money. And it's like, hey, I'm just trying to live my life out in the country.
Yeah.
Well, and then it drives me crazy that there's nowhere on Earth within the borders of the United States. Okay, there's nowhere within the borders of the United States where you can go and just be let alone. Anywhere you go, it doesn't matter how remote and how far away the nearest school is. There are local school districts that are going to come for you and say, you got to give us some money. You have to,
Yep.
Or we take your house. And it's like, can't we just live our lives somewhere? Is there nowhere we can go? But the entire United States is carved up into school districts all over.
Here's what they're also doing in Natalia, which I'm like, it seems so out of touch, so California to me. But so they're trying to bring in these electric buses through the EPA's Clean School Bus Program. And each one of these they're entitled, according to this, they can request, I don't know who they request it from, the district can request up to $340,000, maybe from the EPA, I guess, to purchase and maintain
a grant.
Maintain electric buses, including charging stations. If you guys know anything about Natalia, this is not at all like, we just don't have electric car. We have some. We just don't have very many in places like Natalia.
Well, you know why? I mean, I'm sure there's many reasons. But one is Natalia is very rural and you have to drive long distances and people haul stuff.
That's right.
None of that works with electric cars.
That's true. I forgot. That's the main reason is you need
because they're physically getting stuff done. They're not just zipping around to one fast food restaurant over to work that's 5 minutes away and then back home for the evening where they enjoy it. I mean, that's not what these people are living their lives like.
Yeah. And one of the things that this one board member, Fernando Garza, asked, like, what is the benefit of having these buses? Is it purely environmental? Which is a good question, I think. And the response was, well, with gas at $3.55 a gallon, each bus would cost about $5,000 in fuel to operate. And then he said, and then wear and tear.
How much does it cost to replace those batteries when they fail?
I know.
Right. Well, so that's the thing. It's the maintenance. And, I mean, it's not like it's free to charge things. You know what I mean?
And why was gas at that time when they had that interview, why was gas $3.55 a gallon? There is an answer, and it is state taxes.
Yeah. State and federal taxes. So, playing devil's advocate a little bit, I think the argument for it is, well, the EPA has these grants available, obviously. And so we would be fools not to take them up on it because it's like money on the table. Like you hear this like all the time. But what I would say to that is just that's how they get their hooks in you, It's like now you're being regulated by the EPA, like as if you didn't have enough to worry about with your school district. But now,
and I'm sure that they'll do anything to keep the money coming once they get used to it. Mm-hmm. Anything the EPA says that they have to do or don't,
And then the other side of it is that then it's like you have to maintain it. What happens when those batteries go down or whatever? I remember years ago, and this is probably still going on, it's just not like in the news anymore, that there was a lot of these programs where the police were getting like all this equipment from the military. And they were able to buy it for extremely, cheap.
Because it was their old stuff, right?
Because it was their old stuff, yeah. And so this is when you started seeing, like, police stations having, like, armored vehicles or, like, helicopters or these, like, boats and stuff.
Your local friendly dare officer just come up in a tank and, give you some friendly advice.
I dare you to do drugs.
Grenade and machine gun.
I mean, let me just say this. You know what we should do?
Wait, let me finish this point real
Okay.
quick. But it's like, it sounds like, well, why wouldn't you take that stuff, right?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
it's free. But then what do you hear every time it comes time to vote on taxes for the police station? Well, we need this amount of money just to maintain the equipment we have. Well, but then now you have all this military-grade equipment where you only have a few contractors, if that, in the country that can give you replacement parts for them. And it's just...
Which probably lobbied for the whole situation to
Right.
happen in the first place.
Yeah. And so it's like, that to maintain, it's like, well, what are we maintaining? Why is it important? Like, is it making the police able to do their jobs better? Or is it just this fancy new equipment that they get to have?
Yeah. You know what we should do with this? If they're asking for contracting companies to come in and help them, you know what you should offer as an alternative to the 70% that don't want to do that?
What's that?
VFD.
Oh, yeah.
Like, create an alternative, because I'm looking here and it says that they're falling below long-term academic goals in Natalia, like significantly.
Yeah.
Like, their goal.
I wonder how they are compared to other schools.
I'm gonna
because
tell you.
I think that the whole entire country is falling far below. But yeah, keep
Okay,
going.
so it says here, Amanda Lopez, Executive Director for Curriculum Instruction, gave a progress report indicating the district's first grade students continue to fall below long-term academic goals set by the district in 2021. The goal mandates that the percentage of first grade students at or above level increase from 47% to 67% by August of 2025. In August of 2022, the goal for grade level fluency was set at 52%. The actual amount achieved stands at 38%. In August 2023, the goal was raised to 57%. Actual grade level fluency stood at 41%. Norma Friddle, District Executive Director for Finance, reported that the district achieved a perfect 100 score under the TEA Financial Integrity Rating System of Texas. Okay.
That's the Texas Education Agency, TEA.
Right. But so they're saying you got 100 on their financial situation, and they're asking for this contracting company to come help them with their finances.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, wouldn't it be nice to have the vouchers so you could take your money?
Yeah. Even then...
Give it
As
to
long
where
as
you
there's
want.
no strings attached.
Yeah, even then there's going to be certain strings attached. I mean, the way that they pitch it is that it sounds a lot like HSA money. So, and it all depends on...
that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of times it's like, I don't know, you just submit a receipt saying this was for an expense, healthcare expense.
Mm-hmm. And that's such a broad definition, too. It's
yeah.
like glasses, dentist.
Right. But really, even...
Now it's counseling services. There's so many things that could count.
And I mean, even then, like, you could do it in such a way, like, let's say they were like, we will never reimburse something like VFD with education money.
It's too bad.
Let's say that they did that. You could still be like, well, we're going to buy these education materials and then
homeschool them yourself.
And then VFD, and then give them to VFD to use, right? So it's like, we're going to buy this program, and then VFD is going to run it for us, but we're paying them to run it for us, or something like that. Like, there's ways that you could still, like, be able to pay for your, I would think. I don't know if you'd be able to, like, use the full amount that you're entitled to, but...
What it would be cool is if it actually was, like, let the numbers speak.
Yeah.
Where you could be challenged. Like, let's see if you guys can get the numbers up.
Right.
Let's see if you guys can get first graders to read. Okay. Challenge accepted. Or let's see if you had their math skills, or, you know what I mean? Like, if that was, the incentive was, they give anybody, they kind of experiment with it, do 50% in the system, 50% out, and see who does better.
I think that is like, actually, for people that support the voucher initiative, that is like potentially one way to kind of advocate for it, because what we keep on hearing is that, rural Republicans don't like it because they're, like Natalia, right? Like, they already have trouble with their school systems, and this will just, like, less money will go to Natalia's school system because of it. That's That's the talking point, right? I don't agree with everything that they're saying, but
It's a fallacy.
it's a fallacy. But let's say like you're like, okay, well, just so you know, residents of Natalia and representative that covers Natalia, if this voucher system existed, to like in the next few months after that, I will create a school that could accept vouchers, and this is the way that we would do it, and they would have this option. You know what I mean? And then really let people know that no, these options would come to you if there wasn't a monopoly system of education.
Yeah, the other thing too is in this new age that we're in, post-industrial revolution, this whole school system that is conventional is predicated on the idea that every kid learns the same way.
Yeah.
And we all know that's not true. I mean, it's like factual. Some people do not do well in a system like that where they sit for 8 hours a day in front of, they should have options.
Right.
So I want to read a quote right here that I just read in the Texas State Teachers Association / National Education Association. It's their magazine called The Advocate. And there's this article in here about vouchers. And it says, as long as the governor keeps wasting millions of tax dollars on voucher special sessions, TSTA will continue fighting back because vouchers would be even more wasteful. Texas taxpayers and their public schools can't afford them, referring to vouchers. We will oppose any bill in a new session that includes a voucher program. So I guess I just want to point out this part, talk about this a little bit, where she said Texas taxpayers and their public schools can't afford them.
Afford the vouchers?
Yeah. First of all, the public schools aren't paying. They're getting paid. And it just made me think back to something you said. I think it was on a different episode, Joe, where you were talking about how the point of all of this isn't public schools. The point is children's education. But you can see on this that from everything they're saying, that is not their top priority. It's like, no, you're taking money away from the public school system. And like everything that they say in here, like here's another quote just a little bit further down in the article. She says that he didn't make this a priority in one of the earlier sessions because then and now he's just trying to please wealthy campaign donors who want to privatize public education. And she's saying this as though it's a given that's very, that's like bad, right? Not something
and I'm
that we
like,
want.
I'm not a fancy, wealthy campaign donor, and
Right.
I want vouchers.
Right.
There's more than just wealthy campaign donors that want the vouchers.
Yeah.
There are people that want
It's
freedom.
class warfare.
Well, and just the way that it's being stated
BS.
as though it's an obvious given that that's like an evil endeavor to want to privatize the public school system.
Right.
But the only way that could possibly make sense is if what you care about most is the public school system, not the education of the children.
Right. So a really good follow on X or other social media is Corey DeAngelis. And he's just a rock star when it comes to this sort of thing, where what he does is anytime a politician comes out against school choice initiatives, he goes and finds that either they or their kids went to private school. And so he's like, basically says, so you want everyone else to go to public school without any choice to it, but you want your kids to be able to go to private school, So it's like,
We know people who were part of the administration in the local school district, and I think that it was like a little bit of a battle that they had with themselves as to whether they wanted to have their kids in the public school system or they wanted to homeschool or do some other private school. Because I think that, their mom really liked the private school option, and I'm not sure if she really contemplated homeschooling or not, but she, saw it and probably saw some good things about it. But like with their dad being a school administrator, it was like, no way, we can't be one of those people because
right.
I think
Looks
just
bad.
yeah, because they know that's happened is like that's a sore spot.
Right. Yep. The other thing I was going to say though about Corey DeAngelis is that a point.
I'm looking it up right now. He's got some good posts on X.
Oh man, he's great. But the point that he makes, and he's correct about, is that the way that these advocacy groups or just the people in the public education system look at it, these public teachers unions, is that they are entitled to 100% of the education dollars, and that if they get anything less than 100% of money that's set aside for education, then it's being taken from them. That is their mindset.
Yeah.
Right. It'd be like if someone continually robbed you every day, and then you're like, you found a way to keep a little bit more of your money, and then they claim you of robbing them.
That's what it feels like.
It's like
No, it is that.
yeah.
Yes.
That's the way that people talk about. That's the way that people talk about like tax evasion. You know,
Yeah.
where it's like
You're the thief.
it's like he doesn't even pay all of his taxes. It's like, well, good on him. You know. We all know who we're talking about.
I had one other thing I kind of wanted to talk about that I saw in that Texas Teachers Association magazine, which is just how like you can see. So there's this article. It's entitled "Sex Education Law and Curriculum Standards Improved. Still much room for improvement." And
By their definition of improved or ours?
right, obviously, we don't even need to answer that question. But as you read the article, you can just see like all these parts in there that show that they have to be sneaky in order to get what they want. So I'll give you an example right here. The one thing that really stood out to me is what they call this education, which they're calling like improved, right? Is abstinence plus education. That's what they call it.
They leave
And
out
then-
the rest. What's the plus?
Yeah, don't worry about the plus.
Just the abstinence.
Just
That's all
that.
you care about.
You know
Right.
what's
And they even
Conservative.
have a picture in there. Let me find it here. They've got a picture and they've got like all these little pamphlets, like a collage of pamphlets on a table, and all of them have the word abstinence on them, like all over.
Well,
as though
dive
that's
in. What else is in there? Does it say? In that
it
article?
only barely does towards the end of it. It says, hold on. All it says is this.
I'm sorry. I just read one right now.
Recent public opinion. Hold on, we'll get to it in a second. Recent public opinion supports high quality sex ed for all students, including teaching the concept of consent and respecting personal boundaries set by other people for their bodies. SBOE updates to the Health TEKS will, whatever, I don't know, I have to figure out their acronyms, will provide better sex education for some Texas students, but Texas law still leaves too many students without access. TSTA, informed by research and best practice, will continue to advocate for mandatory inclusive abstinence plus sex education for adolescents. So no, they don't tell you, but they kind of hint at it just a little bit. Right?
Anytime you
Well,
use
I'm
the word
looking at the
inclusive,
back here, just
Yeah.
the picture, and one of the pamphlets says abstinence and HIV.
Right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I
I'm
saw
like,
that.
How about abstinence?
Interesting.
they getting it from needles.
Or HIV.
Yeah, not and HIV. Or
Yeah. Well, it's funny, just the whole idea of saying abstinence plus, because abstinence is a binary, you know, it's either you're abstinent or you're not. So, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like saying like dead or more than dead.
well, and then you have to look closely, but on the bottom of the bottom left corner of these pamphlet, you see a little
Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood
Yeah, there she is herself.
icon.
The famous racist Margaret Sanger, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's
A
like
eugenicist.
even if you knew nothing else about it, it's just the fact that they like if you were just to look at this and you're like, oh, what do they mean by improved? And it's like, what did they just start teaching about abstinence?
Well, this is.
No,
I mean, if you
that's
see,
like the oldest doctrine, you know what I mean, about it in the world since it's been in public schools at all. So what do they mean?
It's
Oh,
older
it's
than
just
the
the plus. That's the new part.
Yeah.
well,
They
the
don't tell you.
plus- I think the plus is, if it looks at this headline at the bottom of the article, it says TEKS standards do not include the concept of consent nor language acknowledging LGBTQ plus students.
I see.
So that's the
Oh,
plus.
That's
plus.
where it is.
Yeah.
I would
So-
say that abstinence has been around since right before
Adam and Eve.
the oldest profession. Maybe you know what that is?
Prostitution.
Prostitution, the
Ah.
oldest profession. Yeah.
Right?
Oh boy.
So, sorry, did you want to?
I just have one other thing I wanted to say about
Yeah.
it. Just that continually we ask ourselves why they are so bent on bringing in these ideas that like most people are not on board with. Maybe eventually through enough brainwashing and, you know, just like bullying in general, people do get on board with it. But that's not how we start out, and that's not how most people are still. And I think the reason is because they get money from faraway organizations, just like we were just talking about with the Natalia school district stuff. They want their electric buses and they want to get all these poor farmers on board, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing. There's faraway institutions with other purposes in mind, dangling money in front of them. And the people running the school districts, it's worth, like, they'll do anything for the money.
Yeah.
Or they just, like, I don't know if they're just willfully blind to the strings attached or if they literally don't know.
Or I think I was having this conversation with my sister we've talked about her before. She's on the school board in Utah. And we've gone back and forth about what came first, you know? The
abstinence or the plus.
And what we've come up with is it's our fault. We are to blame. We have handed over so much to the schools by being apathetic and uninvolved out of convenience.
Yeah.
I mean, it started by, compulsory education, making kids go to school. Women left the home. Now it's like, we don't have time to be involved in our kids' education. You do it.
Well, it's
you
also
just do it.
it's also like a misplaced trust, right? And I think that over time, when you think of the old schoolhouse or whatever, and it's like, well, everybody, like the town comes together and they hire a teacher, and then they're teaching their kids, and it's like, oh, great, we're all happy with the situation. And as time moves forward, you kind of have an assumption that they're on your side, that they have your best interests at heart. They want to teach children. That's what they love to do. And so then it's like, oh, well, I could trust this institution. And I think over the last few years, we've had a huge wake-up call. Like everybody, like so many people have become red-pilled to this idea that, oh, like these agencies, this board of experts or, all these different groups, they don't have our best interests in mind. They have their own interests. And when they say, well, just trust the experts, like you can't do this yourself. You can't educate your kids yourself. You need a professional to do that or whatever. It's like people have been, I think partially, not just like brainwashed or because it's what they grown up with, but I think it's from goodwill. They can't imagine that people would be using them and their kids for nefarious reasons the way in which they do.
Yeah. I think going back to what you were just saying a minute ago, Michelle, about your conversation with your sister, that it's our fault because what happens is people get a certain lifestyle and then they get locked into it. And I think anytime there's paychecks involved, where it's a steady flow of income, it's so hard to get people to put do anything that's going to risk that.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with the school districts, why they won't undo themselves and shrink back down despite the fact that they're pushing, poor people out of their own houses and stuff like that. It's because people are not going to risk their paychecks, even if all it is like, well, all you have to do is just go find another job.
Yeah.
People won't, they just hate it. They won't do it, and they won't see the reality of what that really is.
The other way is so incentivized.
Right. Yeah, because you also have everybody seemingly, especially when you're in that system, it's like a social network. And so everyone around you is like in support of that idea and on board, and they're like a team. Yeah. And you support each other and everything.
I know how that is. I mean, when I started homeschooling back in Virginia, I had a few friends that homeschooled, but I felt like I was somewhat of an outcast. Like
a weirdo.
I was a weirdo, but I'm okay with being I know so I've heard, and I continue to hear. But I mean,
you don't really.
No, I do. I hear that all the time. That I'm odd. I'm different. I'm weird.
From where? Who?
Lots of people.
Who's saying these things to you?
Old friends. They love me, but they do think I'm weird.
Yeah, I get called.
That's just the way it is because I do
called
think
radical from my friends back home. Yeah, and then even just
you just interpreted the '80s way.
What?
Radical.
Interpreted the 80s way.
Yeah, man, I'm radical. Rad. But I don't know, even just a good mutual friend of ours, like I'll talk to him about something. He's like, oh, that's what I really like about you and Emily is it's like you always have a really different perspective that I wouldn't have thought about.
No, I do. That's
a
why.
Nice way to say it, I guess.
That's why I hang out with you guys because you always make me think of things differently. Hopefully, I do
Wherever
the same
you are,
for
we're gonna push you
but
further.
Maybe not. Maybe mine's too like simplistic and like I don't know what's the word.
It's very simple,
conventional. I like things simple. I
You
don't
like
like
to
it.
push. You push towards more radical ideas, more conspiracies, fun stuff.
I do that a little bit
It's
more
fun.
than you guys do. Do we have any culture stuff today?
Well, wait, what were we just talking about? I feel like it wasn't wrapped up.
Weirdos?
No,
Or
before that.
The Abstinence Plus.
So you mentioned Planned Parenthood on there, and I
Yeah.
feel like I have to talk about this because it is so integral to this idea of sex education. And so it's like, what's the draw for Planned Parenthood to get involved in this, right? And so no bones about it. Planned Parenthood is a business, right? And so why would they be going out of their way to produce pamphlets and education materials, go into the classrooms in certain cases?
Recruitment.
Right. And so it's like, we watched the movie Unplanned with, it was the
Abby
story
Johnson.
of Abby Johnson.
But before watching the movie, just listen to interviews that
Right.
she did about it
She-
before they even made it.
She has a really big interview on The Blaze. I think that was probably her longest that I know of, at least. But lots of interviews. And one of the things that she talks about is that there's like two reasons for it. One is she feels like it's clear, like grooming, that you're going into the schools and you're talking about all this sexual stuff that is like, you're normalizing it. You know, you're normalizing the idea of pornography and masturbation and just different sexual practices that are different, and what, you know, a lot of people would say, which what I would agree with, is like deviant. And so that in and of itself is a form of grooming. You know, you're
Well,
changing the
and-
minds of young people to accept sexual practices that they would not otherwise feel comfortable with.
She was saying that a typical thing that they do when they go into a classroom is they go in there and they just to loosen everybody up, you know, as part of the beginning of the grooming process, is they just have them throw out as many different words as they can think of for sex, and they just write them on the board. They're like, don't worry, this is a safe place. You can say whatever.
Right.
And so at first people are really timid, and then eventually they're like, you know, and they start like just saying whatever crazy things they can, you know, just all the words for it, right? And they put them all up there, and then the kids do feel like, wow, like there are no rules, you know?
Yeah.
And then they then they're
Nothing's
groomed.
sacred.
And then they start,
Yeah.
nothing's sacred, and then
Yeah.
they just go into how they can tell them when they're pregnant, but they can't tell their parents.
Exactly. So it's, and again, that's like classic grooming behavior, right? Where it's like, we're going to have our secrets, right? No adult should ever have a secret with a child like that is not like their child, you know, like they should never have anything that the parent doesn't know or can't know or whatever, or
It's
that you
a
encourage
crazy
them.
predatory thing
It is
to do.
predatory. Yeah, it is exactly that.
So are you saying that Planned Parenthood is predatory?
Absolutely. And I mean, they definitely have predatory practices. And then the second thing that, at least that I could remember of this kind of tactic they have, is so A is the grooming, and then B is that they right away, it's like they make it clear and they tell them, like, if you need free birth control, just come to Planned Parenthood. You don't need to tell your parents, you don't need a prescription or anything like that. We'll come in, we have our own doctors, and you can have a free consultation, and then you'll get free birth control. But the thing about the birth control, the pill, right, which is what they're talking about, is that it is the least effective form of birth control, because you only have to miss a day, and then it's like you can get pregnant. And then so you're putting you're filling these young girls with this idea that, oh, you're protected, like you're not going to get pregnant if you do this. And so then they feel like, you know, they can do whatever they want. But they know, I mean, even adult women that have their stuff together miss taking the pill every once in a while, you know? And so it's like, it's a sure thing. And especially the younger you start them, that a young girl will forget at some point, and then, you know, over however many years that they're, you know, quote unquote sexually active, that something's going to happen.
Well, the business plan, as Abby Johnson was saying, is to make sure, or to try and get at least, I think she said 3 abortions out of every girl.
Yeah, before
So they
they're
want
30.
one before they've graduated high school, another in their 20s, and another in their 30s.
Yeah, I thought it was before they were 30, but yeah, that's like, and so it's basically they're trying to create the demand. So Abby Johnson, we didn't explain this. She used to work for Planned Parenthood. She was like a regional manager, not assistant to the regional. No, she was like a
I
regional.
think it was in Houston.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so she got really into the business of it, like she knew like, okay, we have these projections, we have these sales goals, like, oh, we're going to be able to do this different procedure like 1 minute faster than, we were previously able to do it. That's going to make us this much extra money or
right,
whatever.
And I want to just interject right there. One of the ways that they would make it faster so that they could have an abortion like every 4 minutes or something like that was to do the abortions without ultrasounds,
Right.
because that just takes a little bit more time.
But that's more dangerous.
But it is far more dangerous to be prodding around in somebody's uterus without any picture, without any, what's it called, imaging.
Right.
Right? And so, but that's a risk that they, of course, are willing to take, and they don't explain any of it to the girls either.
This is what I don't like about public school. I've had a hard time with this because as someone who pays into the system, I pay taxes. My ethical views or religious views or my belief systems do not align with Planned Parenthood.
They're not represented.
They're not represented. And it's like, I thought we weren't supposed to cater to certain institutions, religions, or any kind of...
Right. It's the First Amendment.
Yeah. And so it's like, I feel much like a person might feel that was atheist in a religious school. That's how I feel when my kids go to public school. I don't feel represented. My views aren't represented.
Yeah.
And I feel like my tax money goes there regardless if I believe in it or not. And that's where it's like, I just feel like ethically having Planned Parenthood in our school system, how did that even happen? Should not even be in there.
I mean, again, it's like this free, like, here,
they told us
we'll
back
give you
in
a
the day,
curriculum. We'll give you free whatever.
They told us, they sold abortion to us. Back in the 1970s when they passed it, they said that tax money would not go to abortions.
It's whatever their version then was of electric buses. Now.
Right.
I'm not joking.
I know.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and then they had that tagline like safe, legal, and rare. But how long did that last, right? Before it's like...
What was it?
Safe, legal, and rare was like what...
Now it's not rare.
Right, obviously.
Nor is it safe from what you just said.
Never has been.
And
Never
now
has
it's
been.
not even legal.
Well, it depends on where you are, but...
Mostly it is.
Yeah.
Not in Texas.
Right.
Yeah. After the heartbeat, right? Isn't
Yeah.
that the deal in Texas?
Right.
Okay.
Now they gotta go. Now they gotta leave the state. But somehow, that was in Texas with those pamphlets, right?
Yep, this is
somehow
all- this is
Planned
Texas.
Parenthood manages to stay in our schools.
And who knows?
Right.
Maybe that was a stock photo or something like that. But, well, maybe not because they're talking about all the abstinence. So, yeah, it's just, it goes back to the same thing, Michelle, that you were talking about. How, like, we let this happen. And it's this idea of just trusting the experts, Just like, well,
Man,
whatever
there's so much of
you need
this.
to do, go ahead and do it, right?
So it seems to me like the recipe is the experts have to seem authoritative and official. They lie. And then someone who has the ability to make the decision, there has to be a paycheck. And I think if you have those three things, they're not necessarily the same person as this, organization that comes in and does the lying and seems super official, right? But you have that all those ingredients, and then that's how this stuff happens.
Yeah.
Paychecks, lying, and the stamp of authority.
It's it reminds me of there's an economic principle, or I don't know. There's at least, I guess it's a kind of a famous analogy, and it's about bootleg. What's it?
Baptists and bootleggers.
Yeah,
Is that the one?
Baptists and bootleggers. And so the idea is that you get these weird alliances that will come together in favor of something. And so with the Baptists and bootleggers example, what you have is making alcohol illegal to sell on Sundays, right? Because the Baptists like that because they're like, yeah, that's the devil's drink. Like, we don't want people going to bars on Sunday and all this stuff. And then bootleggers like it because Sunday rolls around, people need their fix, and so the bootleggers are going to make a lot of money. And so both of these groups, they go to the government and they say, make this a law, right? And they each have their own thing that they are gaining from it, right? But they're using the power of the government in order to make those gains, you know, and that's why you get these crazy alliances that happen.
And I'm willing to bet that in some of those scenarios, some of those Baptists, not all of them, but some of them, their brother is the bootlegger.
Yeah.
True.
What's that joke? How do you keep a Baptist from drinking all your beer when you go fishing? It's like, take 2 Baptists with you. People want to drink around each other. No hate on Baptists. I don't even know if I've ever really met many Baptists or anything. It's just a joke out there.
Yeah.
All right. Any pop culture stuff today?
I have a topic. So did you guys see this thing where Elon Musk told the companies that were boycotting the advertisers to go
Disney?
Well, not just
So
Disney,
enjoyable.
but all of them to go F themselves. Say, if you're going to blackmail me, you can blackmail me with money? Go F yourselves.
Yeah. I'm somewhat
He didn't
envious.
say F.
He repeated
said
it
the word.
like 3 times, but with like
And
slower.
he's like, go
to make sure.
Oh, yeah.
F yourself.
I did see that. I think I think
like-
we're all sort of jealous
And then
that
he
he has that
waved.
money, that he can be able to do that.
Well, you know what they
That's
call
what
Has
that.
the
everyone
money
wants.
to have the balls.
Yeah, because if you had that money, you're kind of above.
Well, there's a name for it. It's called FU money. Yeah, that's what Scott Adams
Someday.
has. Yeah.
Right.
Someday.
But he even like waved because Bob Iger, the president of or CEO or whatever of Disney, was in the audience, and he's like,
Oh, he
Hi, Bob.
was.
Yeah.
He was. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
because he did an interview earlier in the day. It was this big long thing, you know. They're doing all these things. Hi, Bob.
He did.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So what
I
do you?
like also that he said afterwards, when the guy kept on asking him like the same question, it seemed like
He
over and
tried
over
to
again
give
in
him an
different
out.
ways.
Oh, I know.
Right. And the Elon Musk just said, well, okay, then if they do that, then maybe the company will fail. And then we'll just let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone
And-
will know.
Yep. I really, really like that. If it's like, because essentially in my mind, what he's saying is, in part at least, is if you're going to do dirty things like that, then at least the truth will become more clear and that it would be worth it to him. You know what I mean? For like, he would champion truth over the money.
Yeah.
How much did he buy it for? What was it, like 44 million or
Billion,
billion? 44, I can't even comprehend
Yeah.
these things. $44 billion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And he's like, well, if it's free speech, then yeah, it's worth
Yeah.
it.
I mean,
That's
they're
called principle.
Yeah.
And that's why I say it would be great to have someone like him in a situation like Texas.
Yeah. Well, for him to be president of Texas, like, would that be allowed since he's from South Africa?
He'd be our first true African American president.
That's right. That's right.
I think it should be, well, wouldn't it be this? Because when the founders created that, it was whoever was starting that point, American.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that
So
he
that
would
would be the
Yeah.
same situation.
I wonder-
Starting now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's obvious though that he is committed to the free speech aspect of it. Like, he doesn't need that money. Like, he doesn't need Twitter to be making money for him. You know what I mean? He's projected to be the world's first trillionaire. That's 1,000 billions.
Is he still
You know
the
what I mean?
wealthiest, or who's wealthier?
I think it's
Bezos?
Jeff Bezos. I remember now what I was going to say, that I kept on wanting to make this not funny joke over and over again a few years ago, which was instead of Obi-Wan, you're our only hope, it was the Elon Musk, you're our only hope, when he had Starlink, when he had started that.
Right.
Because I remember coming to the conclusion, like, dang, if all the internet companies and all the big tech companies are captured, then what are we going to do? Like,
Yeah.
what can
Help
you do then
me,
after
Elon
that?
Musk. You're my only hope.
Well, it's
Right,
funny.
but then he came out with Starlink, and I was like,
Yeah.
and then he kept on doing like one awesome thing after another, like when he'd go on, Joe Rogan's podcast or all these other places and the things that he's doing, and then bought Twitter so that there could be free speech. It's not
Yeah.
like it was a great, money maker for
No,
him or
Twitter has
something.
never been a great moneymaker.
Right.
It doesn't really.
Well,
it doesn't
I think
produce.
I think
it's,
that they made a lot of
I
money.
think it was
before. I think
questionable.
Jack Dorsey and all that.
Yeah, I think it was questionable how they were making money. I mean, employees there, they would, they'd take payoffs like $10,000, $15,000. People would pay them directly to get verified. It was just a pay-to-play situation.
What do you mean to get verified?
Well, you know how like there's like the blue check mark, right? So that's like shows that you're a verified.
Not a bot.
Yeah, not a bot. But what the verification system became in the old regime of Twitter is like basically
It's like
you
an
had
aristocracy
you had more
for a
clout,
voice.
right? And so automatically all journalists wear blue check mark. All politicians wear blue check mark, but they didn't have to pay for it.
They
I mean,
didn't have
that's
to pay, they
that's
just
just
got away
automatic.
with
But
stuff.
if you wanted to get verified and you're saying, hey, look, I wrote these books, I have this podcast, like I have these TV appearances or whatever, be like, you need to verify me because I'm like a public figure. Because that was the whole thing, like whether you're a public figure or not.
Because there's so many fake accounts, and it was like having a verified account was like the real deal.
Right, but it wasn't just that. It was like, oh, this is a blue check mark saying this. Like your interface to Twitter is different if you have a blue check mark, and like your
Do you
comments
have one?
go to the top. I've thought about getting it since he told Bob Iger to go F himself. Because I was like, well, the model now is that you pay a subscription fee to be verified.
Okay. And you're like, hey, maybe it's worth the subscription to have that.
Because to support the company. Because I think
maybe we should start our own Twitter account.
I think we should. I think
for
we should.
Alabanthem. Can I tell you one story real quick?
And also quit our Disney account, but yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even have Disney. I think I bum off you guys. Oops.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I have no idea. One of my favorite stories of being on Twitter before the big exodus. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
The exodus of 2020 from Twitter. I was on there a lot, and there were tons of bots. I remember like commenting on some Chinese article. Oh yeah, that's right. I posted some article, or somebody else did. No, I did. I had quite a few followers. I had like 400. Not bad for Twitter, And none of them were people I knew. So that's something, right? I mean, it wasn't thousands. But anyway, I posted an article about China and how their COVID rates were low. And I said, isn't it interesting how China just miraculously, their rates are staying the same. They haven't increased like ours have been. And ours are just, exponentially exploding here in the U.S. I'm like, okay, sounds like propaganda in China. And then some bot comments on my article. They're like, no, it is true. We are managing the COVID, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, you sound like a China bot. That's what I said. Sounds like spoken like a true China bot or something like that. And they go, and then their response was, you Trump bot. It was so funny. I was like, yeah.
Well, these days, like AI has gotten so good that it's like, you don't know like how much of just the comment sections of anything is just bots talking to each other.
Well, I'm not sure these were actual bots.
Right.
I think they were bots in their own, like they're paid Chinese people to sit and comment. Because I've seen that too. They have like a bunch of phones that they make accounts with, and they would like go through.
Even
and, like,
the UK does that. Like they have they hire people to go like correct misinformation on social
quote
media.
Unquote misinformation, right?
So it's like, anyway, it's all.
I love that misinformation. Dystopian. That's such a funny term to me. Like, who gets to decide misinformation?
Right. And what's the difference between mis and dis?
Yeah. I think.
Yeah, what is the difference?
I don't know. It's all made up.
I'll tell you the difference. You ready?
Yeah.
Disinformation, I believe, is information that you know is wrong, that you're pushing out there for like some nefarious purpose. Misinformation is information that maybe you don't know that it's wrong, but it is wrong, and you're spreading it without knowing whether or not it's right.
So the powers that be are putting out disinformation.
Yeah.
Do you know
and the rest of us are putting out truth.
Yeah. Do you know what I heard recently?
And then all the in-between people are spreading the disinformation as misinformation.
Yeah, there it is.
Lately, so we've talked about the media like being called different things, like the corporate media. Well, maybe not on this podcast, but some people think it's better to, instead of saying mainstream media, to say corporate media, right? Because they're corporatized, or the cathedral, because it's religion. But
I think we're also at a point where maybe it would be accurate to just call it the government media.
Well, so that's the thing. The most recent one that I heard was the Mockingbird media, which I think is great. Because like Project Mockingbird, right? The CIA thing, where it's like you put out information and it comes back to you, and like you see what it's like, So, and it's not a secret that the different, FBI, CIA, they disseminate information through these things, because a lot of times it'll just say like a government source or whatever, and then news agencies like it because they have this close source and they trust it because it seems like they're telling the truth. And then if you don't treat it with kid gloves, then you don't get that source anymore. Somebody else does.
What'd you say, with kid gloves?
Kid gloves, yeah.
What does that mean?
Meaning, like, you don't say, well, we got this source that said this, but here are the reasons why they may be lying to us or something. So they'll treat it more favorably, like as like a source to be trusted, and they'll push it along. So the thing that I think is, like, Elon Musk isn't perfect. No one is. And even Twitter's not perfect. The X is not perfect with free speech and all these things. But the fact that he released the Twitter files is just, I don't know, like, what he could have done that was possibly better after buying X, to just show, like, this is what was going on. There were these people from the government saying, hey, just so you know, this is like a false story. Or, hey, make sure, just so you know, if you don't clamp down on misinformation, then you could be held liable, and like all these things. And they basically had a desk at Twitter to tell them what could and couldn't be said, and that sort of thing. So even just doing that is just a huge thing. Like, it's like Trump putting people on the Supreme Court. Like, if nothing else, there's that at least, and it's worth everything,
Yeah. It's all like, it doesn't matter. Makes me so mad because the damage is done. Even if he did release the Twitter files, the damage was done because there's very few people that actually research things. And so they wouldn't even take the time to read the Twitter files anyway. So It's just the media knows this and they use that, and damage is done. So
yeah, when and if they ever do admit important truths,
actually,
it's always after, when it doesn't make much of a difference.
Yeah, they do that numerous times. My favorite one is when Hillary Clinton with Benghazi. What difference at this point does it make?
Yeah.
It's like, but you did this.
It seems like their guy for doing that also is Jon Stewart in
the old
like
days.
Entertainment media. No, now.
Even now?
Yeah. Like with COVID.
Yeah.
After it was like all the damage was done and everything, then eventually he was allowed, it seems, to go on there and then make jokes about how ineffective the masks were.
What about the Russian collusion thing? Have they ever they've admitted, right? Haven't they admitted it, that it's wrong? Yeah, we lied about it. Yeah. What are you going to do about it? I mean,
it's the playbook, which I always heard it described as the Clinton playbook, but I think it's more broad than that. Is deny, 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 deny. Oh, that's old news.
Yep, that's what happens. That's why I just roll my eyes at, like, I mean, I appreciate Elon Musk, and I'm always applauding truth coming out, but it's just like the damage is done. And
well, wait, what was it that you just said? You're talking about the.
Let me say it too late.
Oh yeah. So I think that with Jon Stewart, that's his role now, is that after it's safe to say things, like, he could kind of help people to admit it and be like, oh, okay, yeah, let's laugh about that and then move on. Whereas before, when he was kind of, I'd say, more in the mix of it on Comedy Central, it was like to tell people how to think about things. So something would come out, there would be some truth that was out there, and then he would be like, oh, this is your opinion about it, and joke about it in such a way that it's like to kind of frame it in their mind correctly before somebody else has the opportunity to.
I remember I think it was Scott Adams that was talking about how when they want to tell a really huge lie, they have they're like a handful of people who are designated liars. Right?
Yeah,
you remember that?
And so he mentioned, I don't remember who else he mentioned, but like Adam Schiff is a designated liar. Because
even all the other people who are also liars, they're not willing to tell that big of a lie because it discredits themselves too much and stuff like that. Right. They'll tell all the little lies.
But he'll say anything.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it doesn't
something
matter.
that's going to be discovered as a lie, like 5 minutes later.
Yeah,
he's the guy who they get to do it.
Imminently untrue. Yeah. Okay, so here's my question though: is so what do you think about these boycotts? A, what do you think about advertisers boycotting products or businesses or platforms or whatever? And then B, as a consumer, what do you think about like boycotting companies for whatever reason? In this case, like boycotting Disney because they're boycotting X.
Well, I think if companies are boycotting something when they would be making money, that something else is going on. Because I think it goes back to the tiger doesn't change its stripes thing, right? So if there's something where they're trying to use their power in order to push a certain message, despite the fact that they would make money in an honest way. Like something there's just something that we're not seeing. But I think if consumers do it, they're not using this huge arm, right? And then it's like their own skin is in the game, and it looks like a more honest endeavor to me.
The companies do it because of the social credit system. That's why they do it. They don't have
of BlackRock investments.
Yeah, I mean
stuff like that.
they've got something in mind. They're not doing it for principle.
Yeah.
They're doing it because they know that if they stay on the powers that be.
What's it called? It's not called the social credit score. What's it called? ESG. What is it?
Environmental social governance.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Right. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's like BlackRock is and like two other firms are the ones that manage like more finances in the world than the U.S.'s GDP.
Part of the Great Reset.
It's like $38 trillion
New credit
or something.
system.
Yeah,
They're
it's
trying
so
to
much.
implement.
And they
Get rid of
use, and I think Larry Fink is the name of the guy that who's created BlackRock. And what he wants is to control. He wants everyone to think homogeneously. Essentially, you can look up interviews of him explaining this, right? But that's what he wants is like this cohesive culture where everyone thinks the same.
Sounds
And
like
so
robots.
he just had to choose, well, what is it that I want everyone to think? And for whatever reason, these are the things that he wants them to think. So he wants them, the climate change thing, all the gender stuff, all the woke stuff.
Yeah. I will say though that it seems that there's been like we're gaining ground on the ESG thing. I think that there's companies that are
stay strong.
backing away from it. And what's crazy about the Disney thing, boycotting X, is that it happens at a time where they just sent a letter to their, investors or board of directors or whatever, like saying that the reason that we lost so much money is because the values in our products aren't lining up with the values of the consumers. And so it's like, then why put yourself out there on this, battle? And I think what they're saying is that Elon Musk said something anti-Semitic, which is, I mean, it's so wild because you could point to something else and saying like, well, right here, he's like pro, Israel. And he's like, this could be looked at being like anti-Palestinian, like you can't, like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's crazy to take like a complicated conflict and then be like, if you're on, like where you can see from both perspectives if you listen long enough. And then for the powers that be to say, well, if you say anything in favor of this side, then you're just a bad person. And then they can just do all the things that they're trying to do. Where they just boycott you and ruin your business and ruin your life.
If you try to describe what's going on both sides, they just point to the one where they can cancel you for. But
right, and then they say that you're in favor of the bad things that side is doing.
Right.
When you're just saying, no, I can just understand why they decided to do these bad things.
Do you know what's absolutely wild about it in this case is so... I don't even remember what he supposedly said that was anti-Semitic, but what he has done on X is he basically will boot people off if they use the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." So, which is like people take to be like genocide, against the state of Israel.
He is being pro-Israel.
Right. In that instance. What's crazy about it is that there were just 3 presidents of universities that were dragged in front of Congress because on their campuses, people were chanting "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." And they were being grilled and they're like, "Do you think that it is acceptable according to your honor code to advocate the genocide of people?" And they were basically being like, it depends on the context. It's like, what? Like, how could it possibly I don't know. It's just the craziest thing where Elon Musk is like kicking people off for saying this and then being called anti-Semitic. And at the same time, you have these like woke presidents that are saying it's okay to say those things. And it's like, well, aren't they anti-Semitic? Like who?
It's so complicated that it always reminds me of the analogy of the ants in the jar, right? Where you have the red ants and you have the black ants or whatever, just 2 different types of ants that are aggressive normally. But you put them all in a jar and they'll all just make their own trails and ignore each other and do their own thing. But then if someone comes and shakes up the jar, then they all fight each other to the death.
Yeah.
And how it's like, how is it that there's suddenly like all of this fighting and you don't, I mean, especially with like college students, like what? They even understand the conflict? Like, I highly doubt that they would have already understood the conflict. Well, obviously they're being handled, right? Like they're being told what to think.
Yeah.
And then they're just like ready to go.
Right.
Which I mean is a whole other thing to talk about.
Turf. As far as like boycotting companies as individuals, I think that's our freedom. It's our right. And I think it's a good way to, I mean, I think it's...
As consumers.
Yeah, as consumers. I mean, I think businesses they need to stay out of politics.
Yeah.
They just buy your, sell your product and
I think
shut
that
your mouth.
Well, and I think that normally businesses would like to stay out of politics.
Yeah.
But the way that they get dragged into it is that the government always has its hands in them, in like all the...
Yeah.
They have access to the money that the businesses are bringing in through their hard work and ingenuity, through regulations and taxes.
I'll give you a perfect example.
And then they tell them what to do, and they control them.
I'll give you a perfect
and
example.
Threaten them.
In fact, there's 2 examples, if we want. So,
just one.
Do you guys remember when James Damore got fired from Google?
Damore.
Is he the one that was like the whistleblower or whatever that spoke out
the
about
Gulag t-shirts came out after him?
Oh, yeah.
He wasn't a whistleblower. All he did is they had their internal forum at Google where, like big companies a lot of times have internal forums where they talk to each other because they want their employees to feel like they're, cohesive with one another.
Yeah.
Back to Larry Fink's, idea, which is probably really smart, right? If you want to have a successful business, you want to have this, your employees feel like at home. And in the forum, they were talking about women in the workplace and, everyone, like most people on there were saying the things that everyone knows that they're supposed to say, which is it's unfair and women don't get equal pay and all that stuff, like all the feminist ideas. And then he just like presented a bunch of data just saying...
and he got fired.
Yeah, I mean, he was just like, well, but there's all these like pretty good studies that show that women prefer to work in other places. And what else? Which other studies did he say? I'm trying to remember. It's been years now, Joe.
Well, just like, he talked a lot about just what they value, like as far as being like relationship oriented versus like object oriented, and what sort of just like what sort of jobs that they would enjoy more. But it's the
jobs that they enjoy more are in the jobs itself don't pay as much because there's fewer, or there's more people willing to do them.
But it's not even as bad as that. It's like they flew a bunch of people to like China of all places, like for some like conference, right? And the topic of it was like all of this like diversity inclusion stuff. And so he's like trying to be helpful. He's like, oh, well, if that's a problem, let me solve it. And so he presented all this data, and he was kind of like working on this. It was like an ongoing paper. So he had a Google Docs like thing. And he was like, well, knowing all these things, how can we change the jobs at Google to where it will attract more women? How can we make it so that they're happier in these roles and will stay more, and all these things? Like, he was trying to solve the problem, like in a good faith effort to be like, knowing these things about psychology, about the different sexes, how can we fix it?
That was his first mistake right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Admitting that there's 2 different sexes.
Yeah, well, that wasn't as big of a thing
2.
back then. That was like more than 2 years ago. So
but the agenda was already set.
Yeah. But so anyway, so then he ended up getting fired because of like basically like accusation being like, well, you're saying women aren't as good as guys because they don't prefer these tech jobs as much. And it's like, what?
He was a really high performing. He would always get their like award for being the highest performing coder or whatever it is that he did. And
so, but here's what ties it together, because you were talking about regulation and stuff. At that same time, Google was being sued from the federal government.
That's right.
It was a federal lawsuit. I'm not sure who brought the suit. That it was for their discriminatory hiring practices, and their evidence was that they had more men than women in these tech jobs, and that they were making more money. And so you cannot be Google and try to defend yourself in court and say, no, it's not our hiring practices. This is what we're doing and stuff. And then have this big story about James Damore blow, and it appearing that there's somebody at Google that's like, yeah, girls don't even like tech jobs. They're not as smart or whatever, and then not get rid of them, right? And so that's how it plays out. Yeah. So not many people knew about that lawsuit, but that is what was going on in the background. And it was the same thing with Yale, that they had a lawsuit about the same deal, like, their admission practices and diversity and whatever. And then they accepted somebody to come to their school, and then some racist stuff came out that when he was a teenager, that he wrote in a Google Doc, or whatever. And then they disaccepted him. Like, they kicked him out even before he started attending there. But it's like, well, at the same time, they had this federal lawsuit against them because of like this discriminatory thing. It's like, well, we can't have this other thing going on at the same time.
But little did they know the James Damore thing was going to turn into quite a bit more than that, because then right afterwards he went on like the Jordan Peterson show and got interviewed by him, and I think probably like Ben Shapiro, and it's just like a bunch of other free speech advocates, probably what's his name in Florida now? What's his name? Dave Rubin, and just like told them just exactly what happened and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool. It turned into it. I don't know if you guys, the listeners, have ever seen these T-shirts, but it's like a Google T-shirt, except it says Gulag.
It has
so that came from
their colors and their like
right.
icon.
Well, it's getting more difficult to cancel people, and that's the idea. Like with decentralization, just like creating alternative avenues for people to earn money, get educated, whatever, get your own food. Like the answer is that freedom's the answer.
No.
Freedom is always the answer.
I think companies would do a lot better if they just came out strong early, saying we're just here to sell our products. We don't care we don't care who we're selling it to, where we're advertising. We don't get involved in those things.
We're not trying to control the world. We're just trying to offer a product that people legitimately want, and then negotiate a fair price, and that's it.
Yeah.
And you should put that on a template and send it to all the companies, and say, just say this.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, even to say like, listen, our company does have an ethos, which I think comes through in the quality of our products. And we think that the best way to convince people that we disagree with is to provide them with a great product that maybe they'll look into it a little bit more, and they'll decide to come around to the way that we think.
It's interesting how much evil comes into the world just from people trying to control the world to supposedly do good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyway.
Oh, that's it. Thanks, guys.
Shell is done.